Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the SKYMASTER A10 aircraft. We're making great progress on this particular aircraft. The last video, we got the tail section done, the horizontal stabs and the vertical stabs or elevators and rudders. This video, we are moving on to the fuselage. So it's going to get a little bit scattered at this point because we're going to be less specific on the items we're dealing with and we're just moving forward on the aircraft now. Thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below if you have not done so already. And you won't miss any of the videos that we release on the channel. So with that being said, stay tuned guys, and we will get started on the next steps. Alright guys, so we've got the power box wire laid out here, and basically we are making up our wiring harnesses that are going to go all the way to the front of the aircraft. So I'm assuming we're going to put our receiver kind of in the front section there, so we're going to make sure we run the wires long enough. Initially I was thinking about putting the receiver kind of in this area, but we do want to try and get as much weight forward as possible. Not that this really matters that much because it's not super heavy, but we'll see. I might just end up sticking the receiver in this area. So anyways, going to make up two wiring harnesses. One's going to have this end's going to have the 6-pin connectors on it, and going to get those basically run throughout the fuselage. Alright guys, well we've got the wiring harness run to the tail section here. I did put a clamp in the fuselage there, and when I put those clamps in, they do have some adhesive on them, but I always put shoe goop around them just to make sure they never go anywhere. And then we've got our two ends here marked, and of course one end is marked very, very yellow and the other end is very simple. So I like to do this stuff versus labels. I've talked about this before. You know, you're at an event putting your plane together, and you've got people just talking to you and all that kind of stuff. And it's, in my mind, I want to keep things as simple as possible. So I always want to have things just brutally simple. So color coded is ultra simple. Having to sit there and read little labels and stuff like that, I'm not a huge fan of. So that's why I do typically the color coded stuff, because it's just ultra simple. So anyways, I'm just routing this through the airframe. We have put some snakeskin on the wiring. You can see it there, the black stuff. And that snakeskin runs pretty much to close to the front, and that's just going to protect it as it goes through all the formers and everything. So just going to get this run and we'll move on to the next step. Alright guys, we have bolted on the tail section, and looks really good. It was actually pretty simple to bolt on. Obviously we just plug our connectors in there and your back carbon rods slide in place, and there's two bolts holding the tail section on at the front, or the leading edge. Of course we Loctited those, so that's all done. Now I think what we're going to move on to next is the engine pods. Reason for that is before we connect the fuselage, before we put the fuel tanks in there, we want to make sure that we've got all the stuff for the engines run towards the front too. At least that's what I want to do. So engine pods are next. Now they're going to be a fair bit of work because we've got our fans to mount. So the fans are quite easy to mount, but we want to make sure they get finished really nice too. So essentially the fans slip in on the inside, they tuck in, and we would glue that flange all the way around. Now you could leave them like that if you wanted to, but then you're left with this ugly mark here, and it's just doesn't look good. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount these fans in place, and then we are going to take out the actual spinning fan unit. We're going to treat these joints and do a little bit of body work here, and then we're going to paint that to make it match everything and make it nice and smooth. All right, so along with those fans, we need to treat all the woodwork that's inside here. So that's going to go all get epoxied as well too, and of course we need to put engine rails in and all that kind of stuff, and pipe and everything. So, but I think the first step here is we are going to get that turbo fan or fan unit, scale fan unit, glued in each one of these engine pods, and that's going to be the very first step. So pretty straightforward step. We're just going to roughen this area up a little bit around the fan to get rid of the paint or the gel coat or whatever's on there. And that's going to give us a good contact surface to bond to the fiberglass or the back side here. What's up?
Coming to you live from lighter side of RC.
Well, you got to get it right if you're going to say it.
Take two. We are coming to you live from the lighter side of RC. Here with Jonathan as
Just
he's building.
Sanding the fans.
Say something to your fans. Ha ha ha.
All right, so you can see the area where I've sanded here on the fans, just the little lip right there. So we just sanded all the paint off with the Dremel, and it looks good. So now we have a good contact surface to glue in. Next thing I've done is set up the engine pods and just tape the doors open so we've got good access here. I'm going to mix up some epoxy and glue these things in place. So I'm going to use West Systems, the 610 material to glue these in place. No particular reason other than it's what I have handy, so it's what I'm going to use. Alright, so the fans have been glued into place. Pretty straightforward. Hopefully I can show you guys that. I just don't want to bump it too much because it's drying or curing. So I actually ended up putting glue on the fan and on the pod and sticking it together, so we should have a good joint there. And basically we just need to let this cure until tomorrow before we can really touch anything or do anything with it. So we will see you guys tomorrow. Alright guys, so as I showed you, the fans are all glued in. This we're going to have to do a fair bit of sanding on and some body work. But before I did any of that, I wanted to get the engine rails mounted in. Now the engine rails are pretty straightforward. They only go together one way. Now there is a little bit of a difference here in the rail. So there's a short section there on the rail, and that'll make sense when I show you this other end. And there's a longer section on the rail. I just put the longer sections forward. I don't know if it really matters that much, but that's how we ended up doing it. So this sponge was in there just so it would hold these rails in place. So the rails are quite a loose fit. One of them, we needed to push the former over a little bit so the rail would actually clip in place. That was on the other side, or the other engine pod, that one over there. So anyways, the rails are now glued in. We glued that with Hysol, the 9462 material, which is what I use on critical joints. So the engine rails are all good. Now I'm going to show you one little secret here with these rails. So when you glue them on or glue them in, there's a little bit of side-to-side play on these rails. So what I did was just take a straight edge like this, just line it up on the rail to make sure that the rails are flat before you are kind of leaving it to cure. Because there's so much play this way, those rails can sit a little bit cockeyed. It's ultimately not going to make that much of a difference, but what I did in this case was jam the sponge in there, get them adjusted, and then left them to cure, so that worked out good. On this other side here, the top rail was tight, so this is the one we kind of had to jam into place and it would stay there by itself. But again, this one needed adjustment, the top one. The bottom one was the loose one, but we put the straight edge across there and got those all lined up too. So now this surface is flat with this surface, or the engine rails are flat. So now with that stuff done, we can start getting into our bodywork material. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull these fans out. Should be a fairly simple process. There's a C-clip right there on the back, and I think when we take that C-clip or E-clip off, the fan itself is just gonna pop right out. So I don't think it'll be a problem at all getting those out. Once these fans are out, that'll give us access to this area to do some sanding and filling, and then we're going to paint these intakes gray. Pretty much in the whole intake area, and then the rest of the pod we're going to paint black. I think that's what we're going to do, and we're just going to do that just for aesthetics mainly, also for dealing with treating or taking care of the wood formers that are in there. So if we were leaving it natural like this, we would just put epoxy all over the wood. What we're going to do though is we're going to put epoxy on the wood, and then we're going to paint the entire thing black. Alright guys, it is quite simple. You pop the E-clip off. Underneath the E-clip is a flat washer, which is this guy. And then on the fan itself, you've got a conical washer, or a washer with a profile there. And that end goes towards the bearing. So all the bearings are held inside the actual fan unit. Now this bearing was loose and it could actually pop out. I did put a little bit of CA around the bearing just to take that space up to make sure that it doesn't have any side-to-side play in the future. So obviously when we put that back together, we want to make sure that it's put back together the same way. Alright guys, so we are all sanded on the fan area. So basically I just used a piece of sandpaper and did this all by hand. Especially important in an area like this that's rounded. You want to try and avoid mechanical or, palm sanders, power sanders, stuff like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to fill this in with some polyester putty, and that will basically fill in all those gaps. We might get away with one coat, but chances are we'll have to do two. So this is the stuff I like to use for filler. If you guys are doing any automotive stuff, you know what Bondo is. This stuff sands a little bit easier as well too. So you put just a little bit of the hardener on there. But anyways, that is what I will use to fill those areas. All right guys, so we have filled in the gaps on both of the pods. There we go, and basically we're just gonna sand those down nice and smooth and try and get it done. I think we'll probably have to fill that back in with one more coat. Alright guys, so both of the pods here have been sanded, and we still have a little bit of touch up here to do in certain areas. So if you want to get the absolute harshest light, use an LED light, and that'll show you all your imperfections. I don't think the camera's going to pick up on it so well. Oh yeah, there we go. So you can see there we still have some filling to do on the joints. So we'll just go over that one more time with the polyester filler, let it cure, and sand it out again. So we also got two samples done here at Home Depot, and I think they did a really good job based on what I can see from the little paint dot. So they match the dark gray and then the lighter gray. So looks really good. I think they did a great job. Thanks, Home Depot. Alright guys, the sanding of both of those pods is done. So that's all complete. Now we'll move on to the next step, which is going to be priming. Alright, so now that we're ready to paint this, what I'm going to do, the whole process here guys, is I'm going to prime this area first and get all the painting done on the intake area first. What I'm going to be using is the Duplicolor self-etching primer. This really isn't needed in this case. I just like how the sprays and it works really well. So we're going to do that first on both of the engine pods. And if we have to do any sanding, we'll make sure we get the sanding done, and then we'll be airbrushing the lighter of the gray colors onto the engine pod intake. All right, guys. So primer on the pods is complete. So when you're spraying stuff like this, you really don't need to do much prep on the outside. I didn't do anything. Reason for that, plane's going to be dirtied up. When you're spraying these intakes here, you've got a nice area to spray onto, and we came down on the curve and basically there's zero overspray on that area. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to let this primer dry. We are going to do any sanding that we need to do, and then we're going to pull out the airbrush and we are going to spray the lighter of the two gray colors. So we've got darker gray here and then lighter gray right there. There's a bit of a transition line right there. It's hard to see because the colors are so similar, but that's the plan for this. All right, guys, so the pods have been painted. They're all done. Actually completed that this morning and been busy all day. So worked out really well, happy with the results. And airbrushing and everything went fine. It was really nothing abnormal. So that part is done of the pods, which is good. So next thing we're going to do is we are going to get the internals painted black. But I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to get everything lined up. So we have to sand out the back portion here for the pipe. And once we get that all lined up, installed and everything, then I think what I'm going to do is take everything back out and then we're going to paint the inside black. I just want to make sure that we've got all of the holes and everything marked first. So that's going to be the next segment here is going to be getting the pipe installed. All right, guys, just did some rough measurements here on the pipe. You can see my mark right there. This is roughly where I think the pipe's going to sit in the former, and the measurement here I think is 87 millimeters. Now when we look at the actual former that supports the pipe, there's these little marks there. I'm just guessing here, but that's like centering marks because they all look like they're equally spaced. And when we take that measurement, 87 millimeters, looks like we're taking about that much off the entire circle. So I'm just going to do a little bit shy of those marks to begin with, just using my Dremel, and we'll see how the pipe fits and do one at a time. All right, guys, well that worked out perfect. So when you look at a full-scale version of the A10, this is kind of how far the exhaust sticks out. So that's kind of what I'm basing my decision on. And it almost lines up with my mark perfectly, which is actually right now it's sitting right on that former there. So that worked out good. And for this project, this plane will be receiving two SKYMASTER 140 engines right there. So the engines themselves are going to be sitting roughly about there. And we've got tons of space towards the front fan, so that works out great. SKYMASTER engine, guys, a lot of people ask about these engines and my opinions on them. First of all, engines are available at the lightersideofrc.com. There's a link down below to my website. Check it out if you're looking for a new engine. Now, I have been a dealer for SKYMASTER engines now for about 8 months, 7 months, something like that. And I am extremely happy with these engines. That's why I have them in almost all my aircraft. That's why they're going in almost every single aircraft that I build from now on, unless the owner supplies something else. phenomenal engines. I have been nothing but impressed with these engines. In fact, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you know the F-18 is around, and we just actually put in 2 brand new SWEWIN 190 engines. I'll throw a little clip in here or a picture, and absolutely phenomenal engines. So check them out, guys, if you are looking for a new engine. Yes, they are made in China. Amazing quality, and I have had 0 problems with these engines. Of all the engines, whether they're mine or my customers, great engines. All right, so next thing we're going to focus on here is the pipes. So if you look at the shape of the pipe, if the bell mouth or this portion of the pipe is flat, there's a portion that points up, or is, I guess better explained, is flat here and then angled up here. So essentially there's a seam on the top of these pipes, all right? So there's the seam there. That seam is going to go up on the aircraft, or that seam is going to go towards the top of the engine rail, okay? So the seam is going to go this way, is the way to think about it. So basically what we need to do is a couple things. Number one, we need to mount the bell mouth to the pipe. So to do that, these bell mouths sit in quite nice and level in the pipe. So I like to use rivets on my bell mouths because they don't come loose. If you use a nut and a bolt, they can come loose. So all we're going to do for that is we're going to push it into place, and essentially we just need to drill holes through the stainless, through the bell mouth, and we're just going to put probably 3 rivets on there, just pop rivets, tiny ones, and that's going to hold the bell mouth to the pipe. And then we'll get the collar here, the wood collar, mounted or positioned to the bell mouth. All right, guys, I figure I showed you the process here. So basically, took the pipe, and if we call the seam up, we're at about 10 o'clock here for our first hole. Make sure you're using sharp drill bits when you do this, because you have to go through the stainless steel, which is kind of tough to get through. So use a brand new drill bit or a very sharp drill bit. Once I come through, then I just take a file and clean up this side. Ideally, you want to have the rivet come through this way, because this all disappears at the end. Not critical, but looks better. I have put these together when there's not enough room this way. Doesn't affect anything, just not quite as pretty, but I like to have the rivet go through this way. So then we just take our rivet gun, go through. You can see with these short rivets here, they're a very nice size for this combination. And then we just put the rivet in place. So we'll put 2 more in this pipe for a total of 3, and that's going to be nice and solid. All right, guys, and there is the finished product with the 3 rivets installed. So you can see how clean it is, and I think it looks great. So this is going to be roughly the spot that we have the collar here mounted on. What we're going to do is we're going to use some servo screws from RTL Fasteners, and we're going to drill through the bell mouth here into the wood, and that's how we're going to attach this pipe. So maybe we'll line those up with the rivets, and we'll just go 1, 2, 3, and that will screw the entire pipe assembly onto this piece, this wood piece, and then we'll be able to get it installed. All right, guys, and there is our final assembly. So I think it looks nice and clean, very, very nice, and I think it's going to work wonderfully. All right, so both engines have been installed, and very, very happy with the final result. That's the right engine there, and we've got the left engine there. Man, those SWEWIN engines look good. So next thing to do now that the engines have been installed and lined up is we're going to take all the components out, and we're going to prep the pod for painting. Now we are going to be painting the entire inside gray. We're going to paint the door gray, so it's going to be a nice look on everything, and that's going to be the next step. So all this stuff needs to come back out. We have only installed one screw on the turbine, top and bottom, one screw on the mount here for the pipe, top and bottom. That's okay, we'll do the other ones up afterwards. Just wanted to make sure that we were going to be good with the lineup and everything that was going on there. So, gonna pull all this stuff out. All right guys, this is the stuff we're gonna spray the inside of the pods with, along with the equipment trays. I've never used this particular paint before. I've used lots of trem-clad stuff before, but never this particular paint. So what I like to do in that situation is spray some of the sample pieces, or some of the pieces that don't matter so much, like the pipe mounts and things like that. Equipment trays, I mean, if the paint wasn't good on this, we could just sand it off, right? And the reason for that is just to double check and make sure that you're happy with the color, the finish, and all that kind of stuff. So happy with this stuff. That worked out good. Anyways, next mission here is to paint the interior of the pods. All right, guys, everything is prepped. So we've basically covered all the exterior surfaces. What I did for the intake area was cut a piece of foam that's a little bit bigger than the actual circle and put that into place. So that's going to prevent any overspray from getting out. And that's should work great there. And then, of course, we had to leave the back end open to be able to access to spray this area. So that's why we ended up prepping everything, because when we're spraying the inside, it's going to have overspray coming out the outside. Then I had to prep the entire door off because we need to spray this side of the door. So anyways, going to put my safety glasses on, my mask on, and take this out to the backyard and spray her. All right, guys, there we go. She is all painted and all the prep is off. So I just did one coat of primer and worked out really well. And basically it's still a little bit wet. Here's those circles that I cut out of foam that I inserted in the front there. That worked out really well. And she's nice and painted. All right, guys, so one of the kind of inherent issues with this plane is that, all right, guys, one of the inherent issues with this plane is right on the right hand side of your screen is the rod going into the fuselage. The left hand side is the bolt rod. So that's one of the fastening bolts. Now if you think about it, we're going to have a pipe in the way, so getting access to that bolt later on is not really easy at all. All right, so both pipes have been installed again, putting a little bit of CA on those threads. That one still has to be done up a little bit, I see. And I love these turbines now in this modern day and age where you've only got two lines. You've got the one bus cable, the one fuel line, and that's it. Ultra simple. All right, and the last thing for tonight, guys, is we've got the fans installed. And now all we're waiting for is the gray paint to cure or dry. It's still damp, so we'll leave this dry till tomorrow, and then we will get on with installing these beautiful pieces of jewelry that we call engines. Final step here before we put the engine in is we made some custom leads for this engine installation. So we need to put the yellow MR30 connectors on the wire going to the engine. So I'm going to get those installed and then we will put the engines in place. All right, guys, engines are in place. We've got the fuel lines and the data cable or bus cable run. Both sides are complete. Very, very good. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of this particular video. We got lots accomplished in this video. Engines installed is the biggest thing. Pods installed, ready to move forward on the aircraft. So next video, we are going to be coming up with a holding system so the doors hold open. We are going to be doing the fuel tanks because that's the next step progressing forward. And we want to build a startup tray in the area above the fuel tanks. So because of the access, once the fuel tanks are installed, that's kind of what I foreshadow working on the next portion of the build. So thank you guys for tuning in to the A10 build videos from SKYMASTER. Amazing kit. Been very, very happy with this aircraft so far. If you are interested again in SWE wind turbines, check out the lighter side of RC. There's a link down below to our website. We are a dealer for SWE wind turbines. Again, very impressed with these turbines. Absolutely think they're amazing pieces of work. So that's it, guys. If you do like the video, give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below if you have not done so already. If you do subscribe to the channel, it's completely free to do so. You don't get any like rogue emails or anything like that. What you do get is you get updated when I release a new video. When you do hit that subscribe button, turn the bell on so you get notified when I release new videos. So that's it, guys, for this video. Thanks again so much for tuning in. We will see you in the next video.